President Donald Trump securing over $243 billion in deals with Qatar, paving the way for a potential $1.2 trillion economic pledge. And the landmark agreement expected to drive innovation and also enhance American manufacturing. Trump highlighting the importance of Gulf partnerships. Then there's Qatar Airways signing an historic $96 billion agreement for Boeing aircraft, marking a record-setting order of the wide-body jets. So the US and Qatar agreeing on a $1 billion deal for advanced drone defence. It's all happening right across that region. And joining us to break it down in the studio is Jesse Moores from Stadium Capital. Great to see you. Trump's having quite the trip.
He's having a very good trip, isn't he? He's definitely favouring fiscal policy over ideological or even peacekeeping, I think, at the moment.
Do you think that the idea is that if you get people to sign up to deals, then the peace comes after?
Almost definitely. I think he's taking it very much like a business transaction, right? And there's a broad issue that he sees evolving in the Middle East at the moment, with the Arab states clearly disgruntled with what's happening with Israel and the effective free reign that they've been given. And
he hasn't gone to Israel, which is a really big statement.
Very strategic that he's avoided that. But I think he's understanding that, as most of these monarchies in the Middle East will say to him, ultimately, they just care about protecting their monarchies.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and rightly or wrongly.
Well, the Arab uprising, the spring, didn't exactly bring the peace that many had hoped. It brought a lot more uncertainty.
And these monarchies know they need to keep their Arab populations happy
and employed,
right? And the Arab population's uprising are likely going to be driven by what's happening with Israel. So Trump knows he needs to make those monarchies look good and powerful. And it's a very smart business transaction, but it does beg the question, what's going to be left behind as a result from these major deals that he's signing? It looks good for you, American prosperity, but overall security and peace in the region remains to be seen.
Trump's loving this. I mean, just watching these pictures here of him arriving at the Grand Palace there in Qatar. He's being treated like a king. I was watching the red carpet being rolled out as he stepped off Air Force One live. Then there's the question about Qatar giving him a whole Air Force One. This is a region that has been reliant on the United States for 80 years to buy its oil at a time where President Trump and presidents before him have been desperately trying to get off the teat of reliance of oil across the Middle East, meaning the Middle East needs a new trick because oil probably won't be its future forever. What do you think this means for the Middle East, this kind of tech agreement, looking at Saudi Arabia, $600 billion, looking at Qatar, the talk about AI as well. What does it mean for the region?
Well, I think if we bring it back to the geopolitical risks that you have in the region at the moment, and predominantly we've seen the downfall of the Syrian dictatorship, we've seen the removal of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then we're still seeing the murmurings of the nuclear problem with Iran. As far as the future of tech in the Middle East, I mean, the Middle East have been pretty prominent for tech for the last at least 2 to 3 years. They've done a lot of investment into their own domestic services and that side of things. But if it means removing tech being the future in China into the Middle East, into a region that the US, as you've said, has an 80-year relationship predominantly with the Saudis. They've got a very good relationship with the MBS in Saudi Arabia. If they can shift that dominance from China over to that region, I think it's a far better strategic move for the US than it is having it in China.
Jess, you make a fantastic point, because really when we think about the relationship between the United States and the Middle East, it has been a security relationship and a very volatile security relationship. And the story for China for the last 10 years has been one of the Belt and Road. So don't worry so much about the security side, but here's Huawei and they want all of your deals. And the US has gone to war with Huawei. We've seen Australia, the UK, not allow Huawei into 5G. Is Donald Trump mimicking the playbook now, essentially, of the Chinese government to say, head around the world and announcing these huge financial deals that help these countries to change what they're famous for and give them a future?
It appears to be that way, and then you look at sort of the construction of his cabinet as well, or advisors within his cabinet. Elon Musk being a big one, Tesla. What does that mean for the future of electric vehicles when you've got such a heavy reliance on oil dependence for the Middle East? So it could be a bit of a bit of like resetting the relationship on positive grounds to be cooperative and say, well, look, if we're going to be transitioning away from oil in the next 2, 3, 4 decades, and you've got Tesla mimicking or murmuring in the back of your ear, and you've probably got some pressure from Jeff Bezos with some of his EV investments as well, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a way to placate the region so that it's not such an aggressive shift when they suddenly switch off the oil demand and say, we just don't need it anymore.
Yeah, which seems to be happening at a rate of knots. Obviously, the US is trying to get its own oil and trying to get its own energy security and supplies. The rest of the world obviously looking at carbon neutral, which doesn't bode well for countries reliant on oil. We've got these pictures here of Qatar. These have been put out by Boeing. Massive order of Boeing jets. This is such an interesting one because it comes at the same time that Qatar is giving Donald Trump a $400 million presidential aircraft to replace Air Force One because of Boeing's crazy delays. And yet there's Trump announcing, $96 billion
injection into Boeing.
For Boeing. It's quite fascinating to watch how, I guess, Trump works. It feels like that in alone tells us how the man operates.
Absolutely, and there's been a lot of questions around the ethics of all of this. I don't think that's necessarily up for debate. I think it is absolutely a breach of ethics.
It's so bizarre.
It is so blatantly transparent. I think actually giving it any airtime is like, just accept it by now at this point. That said, now whilst this is so egregious with what he's been doing, and you've got all of the clarity of the Trump investments, the Trump family investments over in the region, the sons are now running the business, but they're obviously getting a lot with their new golf course and a couple of new hotels. I think it's just accepting the fact that it happens, whether it's Trump or whether it's Biden or whether it was Nancy Pelosi. Like it is going to happen, that abuse of power. This just seems to be so much more overt and in your face.
Well, it's the biggest gift ever given from a foreign government. It makes the Statue of Liberty from France look a bit like, what else you got?
They call it the Palace in the Air, apparently.
Palace in the Air.
Yeah.
Well, it's again because Boeing has just taken so long to be able to deliver the two Air Force Ones, which when you see the president arriving on that old Air Force One, which was delivered in the 90s and built in the 80s, you start to wonder about how good an idea that might be. Qatar's an interesting one because it really does sit in the centre of the UAE with so much power. You think about when people flee Russia, they go to Qatar.
Yep.
You think about Qatar's role in dealing with Hamas and finding itself really in the centre of those negotiations. Some say Qatar has been a supporter. So Donald Trump accepting a gift from them, which means that they're much closer. It's pretty symbolic. And also these big deals too with Qatar essentially aligns them much closely with the US. That could potentially be good for Israel, surely.
I would have thought so, and it's also worth highlighting that it's the first time a sitting president has sat with Qatar, I think, in like 25 years. So it's been a long time.
It's a volatile relationship.
Very volatile relationship. But then, like you're saying as well, geographically, it's strategically placed very interestingly in the centre, effectively, of the Middle East amongst the UAE and Saudi Arabia as well. It bodes well. I'm not necessarily sure right now if it bodes well for Israel. I think what it's about, it seems what it looks like is that Trump is trying to bring all of these monarchies together in support or in some form of collusion to counter what might happen with Iran. We know he walked away from the treaty in 2015 that was seeing a reduction of penalties on Iran for their reduction in their nuclear testing and in investigations. That seems to be now back on the table in terms of they're still meeting on a weekly basis, as far as we're being told from the White House, to negotiate a treaty around their nuclear arms and investigations. If you can bring the entirety of the Middle East together, with reason, right? You've obviously got Syria and Lebanon that are in a rebuild phase. The lifting of sanctions on Syria I find particularly interesting as well, but we'll park that to the side. But if you can bring Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE together, who notoriously have had some conflict amongst one another, and you throw Bahrain in the mix there as well. Yemen again is in its own civil war, so it sort of gets cast aside, unfortunately. You can bring together a really strong sect of the Arab states, the monarchy Arab states, to hopefully counter what might arise from Iran if that escalates in the wrong way that they anticipate. And as Trump has done time and time again, as he's done with his businesses, the way he does this is through money. He throws money at the problem and incentivises them to do the right thing because it's in their economic best interest.
I feel when you mentioned Syria, I feel that when you look at Syria, when you look at what he's doing with Qatar, when you look at Greenland, when you look at Canada, it feels like the whole thing is sending a message to Vladimir Putin. This could be you, and we will give you this huge, the people will love you, you'll stay in power. And that seems to be the message that he's sending to Vladimir Putin ahead of these crucial talks between Russia and Ukraine. The first, I guess, major talks that we've seen since the invasion back in, what was it now, 2021, 2022.
It's very much a reversal of, we'd be familiar in Australia with the analogy, you play the ball, not the man. It's very much a reversal of how he took his first first presidency, which was very much playing the man, right? And ultimately, it was like, well, how do I dethrone Xi Jinping? Not technically speaking, but it was always the
economically.
idea economically, right? Xi Jinping or the North Korean leader whose name escapes me because it's always one of
Kim
Kim Jong-un or Il. I always lose track of which one it is. But he's very much reversed it now. He goes, well, if I can't defeat the individual, I may as well just keep the individual in play. And unfortunately, you just lose sight of the people underneath it, which again, you can't do everything. So I understand it. Whether it's ethically the right decision, whether it's the best decision for global prosperity for everyone that is not in power, probably not. But I think, yeah, he's absolutely flipped the game in this term and just said, look, I'm just going to do what I can to keep the people in power at bay, happy in their financial position, because ultimately that's what they want. At hopefully a minimal detriment to global peace and prosperity.
Well, his idea is that a volatile world isn't a peaceful world, and a volatile world isn't good for business. And while he's tried to, I guess he's caused a lot of volatility with the trade war, but that seems to have settled down, as you mentioned, the volatility index coming down somewhat. But now it's about trying to secure a legacy, I would imagine, if he can be the one to resolve the tensions in the Middle East after the Bush years and what happened there, and even the Clinton years, then perhaps he'll be famous for quite a few things. Jesse Moores from Spadium Capital, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.